The great hall of the Galactic Council stood quiet as Commander Vector slammed his clawed hand against the metal table. The sound echoed through the chamber, making several diplomats jump in their seats. His red eyes burned with frustration as he looked around at the gathered representatives from across the galaxy. "This is unacceptable," Vector growled. His voice was deep and rough like stones grinding together. "The Devourers have destroyed another world. That makes 17 planets gone, 17 civilizations turned to dust. And where are the humans?" Ambassador Lyra of the Ashanti Collective shifted in her seat. Her blue skin seemed to glow softer in the dim light of the council chamber. She spoke in her calm, musical voice. "The humans sent their response 3 cycles ago, Commander. They declined our request for military assistance." "Declined?" Vector's voice rose higher. "They declined? While billions die," Council Leader Thorian raised one of his 4 arms, calling for calm. The old Zentari had seen many wars in his long life. His gray skin was marked with the scars of battles fought decades ago. "Commander, please. Anger serves no purpose here. We must understand the human position before we judge it." Vector sat back down, but his body remained tense. "What is there to understand? The humans have weapons. They have ships. Their technology rivals our best designs. I have seen their patrol fleets. They are efficient and well organized. Yet they sit in their corner of the galaxy and do nothing while the rest of us fight and die." Lyra pulled up a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed the current state of the war against the Devourers. Red zones marked the lost systems. Yellow zones showed active battle areas. Green zones were still safe. The red was spreading. The humans defend their own borders very well. Not a single Devourer scout has penetrated human space. They have some of the most advanced defensive networks in the galaxy, which makes their refusal even more insulting, Vector said. "They have the power to help but choose not to." Thorian stroked his chin with one hand while another hand worked on a data pad. "I have reviewed the human delegation's statement from 3 cycles ago. It was very brief. They simply said no and left. No explanation. No negotiation. Just a refusal. Cowards," Vector muttered. "Perhaps," Thorian said slowly, "or perhaps there is something we do not understand. The humans are strange in many ways. They think differently than most species. I propose we send another delegation to Earth. This time we ask better questions." Lyra nodded in agreement. "A wise suggestion. But who should go? The humans did not respond well to our last diplomatic team." Thorian's eyes moved across the chamber until they settled on a young man sitting in the back row. "Kelvin Ross, please step forward." A human in his late 20s stood up and walked to the center of the chamber. Kelvin was tall and thin with short brown hair and nervous eyes. He wore the simple gray uniform of a junior cultural liaison. He had been working with the council for only 2 years, helping other species understand human customs and behavior. "Yes, Council Leader?" Kelvin's voice was uncertain. "You are human," Thorian said. "You understand your people better than any of us. I want you to go to Earth. Take Commander Vector and Ambassador Lyra with you. Find out why your people refuse to fight." Kelvin swallowed hard. "Sir, I am not sure I am the right person for this. I am just a liaison. I work with trade agreements and cultural exchanges." "That is exactly why you are the right person," Thorian said. "You are not a general or an admiral. You are someone who builds bridges between species. We need a bridge to the humans right now. Will you do this?" Kelvin looked at Vector's angry face and then at Lyra's hopeful expression. He thought about the 17 dead worlds. He thought about his home planet Earth and wondered what his people were thinking. Finally, he nodded. "Yes, sir. I will go." "Good," Thorian said. "You leave tomorrow. Take the diplomatic cruiser Harmony's path. It is fast and well protected. The journey to Earth will take about 2 weeks through slipspace. Use that time to prepare your questions." The meeting ended and the diplomats filed out of the chamber. Kelvin stood alone for a moment, feeling the weight of his new responsibility. He had left Earth 5 years ago to work with the Galactic Council. He had not been home since. Now he was going back, but not for a happy reunion. He was going back to ask his own people a hard question. "Why won't you help?" That night, Kelvin could not sleep. He lay in his small quarters aboard the council station and stared at the ceiling. He kept thinking about what Vector had called humans. Cowards, was that true? Kelvin did not think so, but he also could not explain why Earth had said no to the council's request. It did not make sense. The next morning, Kelvin packed his few belongings and made his way to the docking bay. The Harmony's Path was a beautiful ship. It was sleek and silver, built by the Ashanti for diplomatic missions. It had comfortable quarters, a good crew, and strong shields. It was not a warship, but it could defend itself if needed. Vector was already on board when Kelvin arrived. The Kryn commander stood in the cargo bay, checking weapons and equipment. He looked up when Kelvin entered. "Human," he said with a grunt. "Commander," Kelvin replied, trying to sound professional. "I do not trust your people," Vector said bluntly. "But Thorian thinks you can help, so I will give you a chance. Do not waste it." "I will do my best, sir." Lyra arrived a few minutes later with a small team of aides. She smiled warmly at Kelvin. "Are you ready for this journey, young one?" "As ready as I can be," Kelvin said. "Good. Come, let me show you to your quarters. We have a long trip ahead of us." The Harmony's Path departed the council station an hour later. Kelvin watched through a viewport as the station grew smaller and smaller, until it was just a point of light against the black of space. Then the ship's slipspace drive activated and reality bent around them. The stars stretched into long lines of light and then they were gone, traveling faster than light toward the human homeworld. Kelvin sat in his quarters and opened his personal datapad. He had access to basic human history files, things any council member could read. But now with his new diplomatic clearance, he could access deeper files. Restricted files. Files about human history that were not shared with other species. He hesitated for a moment, then began to read. What he found would change everything. The first week of travel passed slowly. Kelvin spent most of his time in his quarters, reading through the restricted human history files. Each day he found something new that made his stomach turn. Each night he had trouble sleeping. On the 8th day of the journey, Vector found him in the ship's observation deck. Kelvin was staring out at the swirling colors of slipspace, lost in thought. The Kryn commander sat down heavily in the chair next to him. "You look terrible, human," Vector said. "When did you last eat?" Kelvin blinked and looked at the commander. "I am not sure. Yesterday, maybe." "That is not good. A warrior must keep his strength." Vector paused, then added, "Even if that warrior is just a diplomat." Kelvin almost smiled at that. "I am not much of a warrior, Commander. Perhaps not. But you are troubled. I can see it in your eyes. What have you been reading in those files of yours?" Kelvin was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Have you ever studied human history, Commander? Our real history? Not the basic information in the Council database?" Vector shook his head. "Why would I? I know what I need to know about humans. You are a young species. You reached the stars only 200 years ago. You keep to yourselves mostly. You trade fairly and follow Council laws. That is enough." "I wish it was that simple," Kelvin said softly. He looked back out at slipspace. "Commander, let me ask you something. In your species' history, what was your bloodiest war?" Vector sat up straighter, pride entering his voice. "That would be the Kryn-Selvoth War. It lasted 40 years. We fought the Selvoth people across 12 star systems. It was brutal and honorable. 8 million Kryn died in that war. We remember them all as heroes." 8 million in 40 years, Kelvin repeated. "That is terrible. I'm sorry for your loss." "It was centuries ago," Vector said. "But yes, it was our darkest time." "Why do you ask?" Kelvin turned to face the commander directly. "Humans had a war once. It lasted 6 years. Not 40, just 6. In those 6 years, over 70 million humans died." Vector stared at him. "That is not possible. No war kills that many in such a short time. Your numbers are wrong." "I wish they were," Kelvin said. He pulled out his datapad and showed Vector the files. This was called the Second World War. It happened in the 20th century before we even left our own planet. 70 to 80 million dead. Most of them were not soldiers. They were regular people, children, families. Vector took the datapad with shaking hands. He read through the files, his red eyes getting wider with each page. He saw the numbers. He saw the images. He saw the documentation of battles that killed more people in a single day than most galactic conflicts killed in a year. "This cannot be real," Vector whispered. "This is some kind of propaganda, some kind of trick." "It is real," Kelvin said. "Every word, every number. And that was just one war, Commander. We had 2 world wars. Then we had something called the Cold War, where we built enough weapons to destroy our entire planet 100 times over. Then we had the resource wars in the 21st century. Then the colony rebellions in the 22nd century. We are very good at war, Commander. Too good. Vector handed back the datapad like it was burning his hands. He stood up and walked to the viewport. For a long time, he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, quieter. I called your people cowards. I was wrong. You are not cowards. You are something else, something I do not have a word for. Careful, Kelvin said. That is the word my people use. We learned to be careful with war. The next few days were different. Vector stopped making angry comments about humans. Instead, he asked Kelvin questions. He wanted to understand how humans could kill so many of their own kind. Kelvin tried to explain, but the words felt hollow. How could you explain world wars to someone whose worst conflict killed 8 million over 40 years? Lyra joined their conversations on the 10th day. She sat with them in the observation deck and listened as Kelvin shared more human history. She was particularly horrified by something called the Holocaust, where humans systematically murdered 6 million people based on their religion and ethnicity. But why? Lyra kept asking. Why would anyone do such a thing? Fear, Kelvin said. Hate. Prejudice, the belief that some people were less than human. It is the darkest part of our history. And your people remember this? Lyra asked. You teach it to your children? We do, Kelvin confirmed. We have museums and memorials. We have a saying, never forget. We make sure every new generation knows what we did, what we are capable of doing. Vector was looking at a file about something called trench warfare from the First World War. Millions of men living in mud and filth, going over the top to charge across open ground into machine gun fire. Entire generations lost for a few miles of territory. This is insane, he muttered. Why did they keep fighting like this? Because that is what soldiers do, Kelvin said. They follow orders. They fight for their country. They do what they are told even when it makes no sense. He paused. That is one of the scary things about humans, Commander. We are very good at following orders, even terrible ones. The ship's captain announced they would arrive at Earth in 2 days. Kelvin felt his anxiety growing. He had learned so much about his own species' history in the past 2 weeks. Things they did not teach in basic school. Things that were kept in restricted files because they were too disturbing for most people to know. He understood now why Earth had said no to the Galactic Council. He understood the fear that drove that decision. But he wondered if Vector and Lyra would understand. Could they really grasp what it meant when humans went to war? On the final night before arrival, Kelvin had a nightmare. He dreamed of battlefields covered in bodies. He dreamed of cities burning. He dreamed of weapons that could end worlds with the push of a button. He woke up sweating and shaking. He got dressed and went to the observation deck. To his surprise, both Vector and Lyra were already there. They had been reading more files. Neither of them looked like they had slept. I have been thinking, Vector said when Kelvin sat down. The Devourers are terrible. They destroy everything they touch, but they are just animals following their nature. Your people, though, you chose to do these things. You planned them. You built machines to make killing more efficient. That is somehow worse. I know, Kelvin said quietly. Lyra looked at him with her large, gentle eyes. When we arrive at Earth tomorrow, what do you think your leaders will tell us? The truth, Kelvin said. Or at least I hope they will. We owe you that much. The next morning, the Harmony's path dropped out of slipspace near Earth. Kelvin pressed his face against the viewport and looked at his home world. The blue and green planet looked so peaceful from space. So beautiful. It was hard to believe that this world had seen so much blood. Earth Traffic Control contacted the Harmony's path within minutes of their arrival. A calm female voice welcomed them and directed them to Geneva Station, a large orbital facility that handled all diplomatic visits. 2 human patrol ships appeared on either side of the diplomatic cruiser, escorting them safely to the station. Kelvin watched the patrol ships with new eyes. They looked sleek and efficient. He knew from the files he had read that those ships carried weapons powerful enough to crack a small moon. But they flew peacefully, their weapons powered down, simply guiding the visitors to safety. The docking procedure was smooth and professional. Within an hour, Kelvin, Vector, and Lyra were walking through the clean white corridors of Geneva Station. Human guards in dark blue uniforms stood at attention as they passed. Their faces were neutral and professional. They were led to a large conference room with a beautiful view of Earth below. A woman in a formal black suit stood waiting for them. She was in her 50s with short gray hair and sharp green eyes. Two others stood with her. One was a man in a naval uniform with silver hair and stern features. The other was a woman in a military uniform with brown skin and kind eyes. "Welcome to Geneva Station," the woman in the suit said. "I am Director Karen Hughes of the Human Defense Council. This is Admiral Cole Bennett and General Linda Hayes. Please sit down. Can we offer you any refreshments?" They all sat around a long table. Vector declined refreshments, but Lyra accepted a glass of water. Kelvin took a cup of coffee, grateful for the familiar taste of home. Director Hughes folded her hands on the table. "We received word that you wanted to meet with us. We are happy to talk, though I suspect I know why you are here." Vector leaned forward, his patience already thin. "Then you know that the Galactic Council needs your help. The Devourers have destroyed 17 worlds. Billions of lives have been lost. Your technology and your fleets could turn the tide of this war, yet you refuse to help. I came here to ask why. Why do you sit here in safety while others die?" Director Hughes did not seem offended by Vector's harsh tone. She simply nodded slowly. "You think we are cowards. I think you are selfish," Vector said. "You have power but will not use it." Admiral Bennett spoke for the first time. His voice was deep and controlled. "Commander, let me ask you a question. How many wars has your species fought in the last 1,000 years?" Vector straightened with pride. "The Kryn have fought 7 major wars and countless smaller conflicts. We are a warrior people. We believe in honor and strength. And you are proud of this," the Admiral said. "It was not a question. Of course, combat tests us. It makes us stronger." General Hayes spoke next. Her voice was warmer than the Admiral's, but no less serious. "Commander, humans have fought over 15,000 documented wars in our recorded history. And that is just the ones we have good records for. There were probably thousands more we have forgotten about." Vector blinked. 15,000? That is impossible. Your recorded history only goes back a few thousand years. 8,000 years, actually, Director Hughes said. 15,000 wars in 8,000 years. We averaged almost 2 wars every year somewhere on our planet. Sometimes we had multiple wars happening at the same time in different regions. Lyra set down her water glass with a shaking hand. "How did your species survive?" "Barely," General Hayes said softly. "We came very close to extinction several times. The closest was in the mid-20th century, when we developed nuclear weapons. We built enough to destroy ourselves many times over. For 50 years we lived with the knowledge that a single mistake could end everything." Director Hughes stood up and walked to the window. She looked down at Earth, her expression sad. "When you asked us to join your war against the Devourers, the Council was confused by our refusal. You thought we were afraid or weak. But that is not why we said no." "Then why?" Vector demanded. Hughes turned to face them. "Because we know what happens when humans go to war. We have seen it too many times. We have studied it. We have lived through it. When humans fight, we do not just fight to win. We fight to completely destroy the enemy. We do not know how to do half measures in war." Admiral Bennett stood as well. "Commander Vector, you mentioned that the Kryn-Selvath War lasted 40 years and killed 8 million of your people. That was your bloodiest conflict ever. I am not trying to diminish that loss. 8 million deaths is a tragedy. But let me tell you about just one human battle." He pulled up a holographic display showing a city covered in snow. This was called the Battle of Stalingrad. It was one battle in one city during our Second World War. It lasted 5 months. In those 5 months, over 2 million people died. Soldiers and civilians. The entire city was destroyed. People were eating rats to survive. They were burning furniture to stay warm. And neither side would surrender. Vector stared at the images. One city. 2 million dead. In 5 months. That was just one battle, the Admiral continued. The war had hundreds of battles. It lasted 6 years total. By the end, over 70 million humans were dead. Entire cities had been bombed into rubble. We used weapons called atomic bombs that destroyed everything for miles around. We created industrial systems designed purely to kill people as efficiently as possible. Lyra covered her mouth with her hand. Tears were forming in her large eyes. "Why are you telling us this?" "Because you need to understand what you are asking for," General Hayes said gently. "You want us to bring our ships and our weapons and our soldiers to fight the Devourers. But you do not understand what that means. When humans go to war, we do not just send our armies. We send our industries. We send our scientists. We send our entire civilization. We turn everything toward one goal, complete victory. Director Hughes walked back to the table. After the Second World War, we made a promise. We said never again. We said we would find better ways to solve our problems. When we finally reached the stars and met other species, we were relieved. We hoped that by joining a larger galactic community, we could leave our violent past behind. And you have, Lyra said. You have been peaceful members of the Council for 100 years. We have, Hughes agreed. But that peace is fragile, Ambassador. It requires constant effort and constant vigilance. We have policies now, rules we follow to keep ourselves in check. One of those rules is simple. We do not volunteer for other people's wars. Vector slammed his hand on the table. But this is not just some small conflict. The Devourers will not stop. They will consume everything. Eventually, they will reach human space. What will you do then? Then we will fight, Admiral Bennett said quietly. If the Devourers threaten Earth or any human colony, we will defend ourselves. Our defensive fleets are strong. Our weapons are ready, but there is a difference between defending your home and going on a crusade across the galaxy. We are not asking for a crusade, Vector protested. We are asking for help, are you? General Hayes asked. Because once we start fighting, where do we stop? Once we engage with the Devourers, we will study them. We will learn their weaknesses. We will develop weapons specifically designed to kill them, and we will be very, very good at it. That is what humans do. We solve problems with extreme efficiency. Director Hughes sat back down. Let me be very clear, Commander. We are not refusing to help because we are afraid of the Devourers. We are refusing because we are afraid of ourselves. We know what we are capable of. We have seen the darkness inside our own species, and we have decided that the best way to protect the galaxy is to keep that darkness locked away. The room fell silent. Kelvin had been quiet throughout the meeting, but now he spoke. Director Hughes, with respect, is there no middle ground? The Council is not asking us to commit genocide against the Devourers. They just need help defending innocent worlds. Hughes looked at the young liaison with kind but sad eyes. Kelvin, you have been reading the restricted files during your journey here. Tell me, have you found any examples in human history where we went to war with good intentions and it stayed clean and simple? Kelvin looked down at his hands. He thought about all the files he had read, all the wars that started with noble goals and ended in horror. He shook his head slowly. No, Director, I have not found any. Neither have we, Hughes said. And we have looked. We have studied thousands of years of human warfare. Every time we think war will be quick and clean, it turns into something much worse. Vector stood up, frustration clear on his face. So that is your final answer? You will let worlds burn rather than risk getting your hands dirty? That is not fair, Commander, Admiral Bennett said, his voice hardening. We keep our hands clean by keeping them off our weapons. That is not cowardice. That is discipline. It looks like cowardice to me, Vector shot back. General Hayes stood up calmly. Commander, I think you need to see something. Director Hughes, may I take our guest to the archive? Hughes thought for a moment, then nodded. Yes, I think that would be appropriate. Perhaps it will help them understand. The archive? Lyra asked. What is that? Come with me, General Hayes said. I will show you. They left the conference room and took an elevator down through the station and then down further into a facility beneath it. The elevator ride took several minutes. When the doors finally opened, they stepped into a massive underground chamber. Kelvin had never been to this place. He looked around in awe. The chamber was huge, easily the size of several football fields. The walls were lined with display cases and holographic projectors. In the center was a large circular platform with comfortable seating arranged around it. Welcome to the Archive of Remembrance, General Hayes said. Her voice echoed in the large space. This facility contains records of human warfare throughout history. We built it as a reminder, so we would never forget what we are capable of. She led them to the central platform and gestured for them to sit. Vector and Lyra sat down, both looking confused and a bit uneasy. Kelvin sat between them, his heart beating fast. General Hayes walked to a control panel. What you are about to see is difficult to watch. These are not just statistics or reports. These are real events that happen to real people. We have preserved them through historical records, testimonies, and reconstructions. If at any time you need to stop, just say so. She activated the system. The lights dimmed and the air around them seemed to shimmer. Suddenly, they were no longer in a clean underground facility. They were standing in mud. The sound of distant explosions filled the air. The smell was terrible, a mix of rot and chemicals. "This is the Western Front," General Hayes's voice came from somewhere above them. "The First World War. The year is 1916. Around you are trenches where soldiers lived for months, sometimes years." Vector looked around in shock. Holographic soldiers sat in the mud, their faces hollow and tired. Some were writing letters. Some were sleeping. Some just stared at nothing. The trenches were filled with water and filth. "Rats crawled over everything. Watch," General Hayes said. A whistle blew. The soldiers around them climbed out of the trenches and began running across an open field. Immediately, the sound of machine guns filled the air. The soldiers fell. Dozens at first, then hundreds. They kept coming, kept climbing out of the trenches, kept running toward the enemy lines, and they kept dying. "This is the Battle of the Somme," General Hayes explained. "On the first day, 20,000 British soldiers died. 20,000 in one day. By the end of the battle, over 1 million men from both sides were dead or wounded. The territory gained could be measured in miles. 1 million casualties for a few miles of mud," Lyra was crying. Vector's face had gone pale. The scene faded and changed. Now they stood in a city. Buildings were on fire all around them. People were running, screaming. Above them, aircraft dropped bombs. "This is a civilian city during the Second World War," General Hayes said. Both sides bombed civilian targets. They called it strategic bombing. The goal was to break the enemy's will to fight by destroying their cities. Hundreds of thousands of civilians died in these raids. The scene changed again. This time they were in a place that made Kelvin feel sick. Rows and rows of thin people in striped uniforms, guards with weapons, large buildings with chimneys pumping out smoke. "This is a concentration camp." General Hayes's voice was heavy with sorrow. "The darkest chapter in human history. Here, humans systematically murdered other humans based on their religion, ethnicity, or other characteristics deemed undesirable. 6 million people died in these camps. Most of them did nothing wrong. They were just different." Lyra stood up and turned away, unable to watch. Vector sat frozen, his eyes wide with horror. The scene changed to a bright flash of light. A mushroom cloud rose over a city, then another city. The heat and radiation visible even in the holographic recreation. "Nuclear weapons," General Hayes said. "We used them twice to end the Second World War, both times on cities full of civilians. Over 200,000 people died instantly, or from radiation in the following weeks. These weapons were so terrible that we have not used them in war since, but we still have them. Thousands of them, enough to end all life on Earth several times over." The scenes continued. The resource wars of the 21st century, where automated weapons hunted humans with machine precision. The colony rebellions where human fought human in the cold of space. Ship battles where thousands died in seconds. Ground battles where entire settlements were wiped out. Finally, the projections stopped. The lights came back on. They were sitting in the underground chamber again. Lyra was still crying. Vector sat very still, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. General Hayes walked back to them. "This is why we say no. Not because we cannot fight, not because we do not care about the lives being lost to the devourers, but because when humans fight, this is what happens. We are efficient at killing. We are creative at destruction. We turn war into an industrial process." Admiral Bennett had joined them during the presentation. He stood at the edge of the platform, his face grim. "The Galactic Council sees the devourers as a terrible threat. And you are right. They are dangerous. They are destructive. But they are also simple. They consume and move on. They do not think. They do not plan. They do not optimize." He walked closer to Vector. "Humans think. Humans plan. Humans optimize. If we join this war, we will not just fight the devourers. We will study them. We will learn everything about them. We will find the most efficient ways to kill them, and then we will build machines to do it on a massive scale. We will turn their destruction into a science. And when the devourers are gone," General Hayes added, "what then? We will have rebuilt our war machine. We will have trained a new generation of soldiers. We will have weapons designed for maximum killing efficiency. What do we do with all of that? Where do we point it next?" Vector finally found his voice. "You would not. You are part of the council. You follow our laws. We follow those laws now. Director Hughes said, having joined them. Because we choose to. Because we work hard every day to be better than our history. But war changes people. War brings out the worst in us. We have learned that lesson too many times, Kelvin spoke quietly. You are afraid that if we start fighting, we will not be able to stop. Yes, Hughes said simply. That is exactly what we are afraid of. They returned to the conference room in silence. No one spoke during the elevator ride back up. Lyra had stopped crying, but her eyes were still red. Vector walked like he was in a dream, his confident warrior stride replaced with uncertain steps. Kelvin felt numb inside. When they sat back down at the conference table, Director Hughes ordered tea for everyone. The simple act of preparing and serving hot drinks seemed to help ground them all back in reality. They sat quietly for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Vector spoke. His voice was different now, softer, less certain. I understand now why you said no. I wish I did not, but I do. He looked directly at Director Hughes. You are not cowards. You are something more frightening. You are warriors who have seen too much war. That is a good way to put it, Admiral Bennett said. He took a sip of his tea. The Kryn have a proud warrior culture, Commander. You see battle as a test of honor and strength. Most species in the galaxy think of war the same way. It is terrible, but it has rules. It has meaning. It ends when one side surrenders or when peace is negotiated. Human wars do not work that way? Vector asked. They can, General Hayes said. But too often they do not. We have a saying, war is hell, and we mean it literally. Once we start fighting, everything else becomes secondary. Victory becomes the only goal. The methods become less important than the results. Lyra wiped her eyes and spoke for the first time since seeing the archive. Her voice was shaky but determined. I understand your fear now. But what about our fear? The Devourers are real. They are destroying worlds right now. If humanity will not help, what should we do? Director Hughes leaned forward. That is a fair question, Ambassador. And I am glad you asked it because we are not completely refusing to help. We are just refusing to send our military forces into combat. What does that mean? Vector asked. It means we can offer other kinds of assistance, Hughes explained. We have been studying the Devourer threat even though we are not directly involved in the fighting. Our scientists have been analyzing all the data the Council has shared. We have developed some technologies that might help. Admiral Bennett pulled up a display showing various ship designs and weapon configurations. We can share defensive technologies with the Council. Better shields, more efficient point defense systems, improved early warning networks. These technologies will help you defend worlds more effectively without requiring human forces to fight. We can also share tactical information, General Hayes added. We have run thousands of simulations on fighting the Devourers. We can tell you what strategies work best, how to evacuate civilians more efficiently, how to set up defensive perimeters. All of our research is available to the Council. Vector studied the displays. His military mind was already seeing the value in what they offered. These technologies are impressive. They could save many lives. But, Commander, with respect, it is not the same as having your ships in the fight. The Devourers are spreading fast. We need more firepower. I know, Admiral Bennett said, and I wish we could give you a different answer. But this is the line we have drawn. We will help you fight more effectively. We will give you every advantage we can, but we will not send human soldiers to kill Devourers. Because you are afraid once you start, you will not stop, Vector said. It was not a question anymore. Yes, Hughes confirmed. Once we fully commit to a war mentality, everything changes. Our economy would shift to war production. Our researchers would focus on weapons development. Our culture would become focused on the enemy. And history has shown us that once we go down that path, it is very hard to come back. Lyra thought about this carefully. What if the Devourers reach human space? What if they attack your worlds? What would you do then? Then we would defend ourselves, Hughes said firmly. Make no mistake, Ambassador. If the Devourers threaten Earth or any human colony, we will fight with everything we have. Our defensive fleets are strong. Our weapons are ready. We are not pacifists. We are just very, very careful about when and how we use force. And if you do have to fight, Lyra pressed, if the Devourers come to your borders and you have no choice, Admiral Bennett's face became hard. Then the galaxy will see what human warfare really looks like. And I pray that day never comes because it will not be pretty. We will not just defend our worlds. We will hunt down every single Devourer until none remain. We will develop weapons specifically designed to kill them in the most efficient ways possible. We will turn their own biology against them, and we will not stop until the threat is completely eliminated. The room fell quiet again. The implications of what the Admiral said hung heavy in the air. Kelvin realized something then. The other species in the galaxy were afraid of the Devourers because they were destructive and unstoppable. But humanity was afraid of itself because it knew it could be something worse. Vector stood up and walked to the window. He looked down at Earth, that beautiful blue and green world that seemed so peaceful. "I came here angry," he said. "I thought you were selfish. I thought you were hiding while others fought. Now I see the truth. You are protecting us from yourselves as much as protecting yourselves from war." "That is correct," Director Hughes said. Vector turned back to face them. "I will take your offer of technology and tactical information back to the Council. It is better than nothing. But I have one more question." "Ask," Hughes said. "What if we are losing? What if even with your technology we cannot stop the Devourers? What if they are about to destroy the Council and take over the entire galaxy? Would you let that happen rather than risk going to war?" Director Hughes stood and walked over to stand next to Vector at the window. She was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Commander, I hope we never have to answer that question, because if it comes to that choice, there are no good options. Either we let the galaxy fall to the Devourers or we become something terrible in order to stop them." "And which would you choose?" Vector asked. "I do not know," Hughes admitted. "That decision would be beyond my authority. It would require input from every human government. It would require debate and discussion. It would tear our society apart because there would be no right answer." Admiral Bennett joined them at the window. "But I can tell you this, Commander. If that day comes, if we are forced to make that terrible choice, the Devourers will wish they had never encountered humanity. Because we do not just fight wars, we win them. Completely, totally. And we do not stop until the enemy is completely defeated." "Is that a comfort or a threat?" Lyra asked softly. "Both," the Admiral said. "It is a promise that if the galaxy truly needs us, we will come. But it is also a warning about what that really means." Kelvin finally spoke up. "Council Leader Thorian wanted me to find out why humans stay away from war. I think I can give him an answer now." Everyone looked at him. The young liaison stood up and walked to join the others at the window. "We stay away from war because we are too good at it. We stay away because we know what we become when we fight. We stay away because we have seen the darkness inside ourselves and we never want to see it again." "Well said," Director Hughes told him. They spent the next few hours going over the technologies and information that Earth would share with the Council. Admiral Bennett and General Hayes explained the defensive systems in detail. They showed Vector evacuation protocols that could save millions of lives. They shared tactical data that could help Council forces fight more effectively. By the time the meeting ended, Vector looked exhausted. Not physically, but emotionally. He had come to Earth expecting a simple answer. Instead, he had learned truths about humanity that changed how he saw everything. As they prepared to leave, Vector stopped at the door and turned back to Director Hughes. "Thank you for showing us the archive. I will never forget what I saw there. And I think I understand now why you call it the Archive of Remembrance. You need to remember what you are capable of so you do not do it again." "Exactly," Hughes said. "We remember so we can choose a different path." The Harmony's path departed Earth the next morning. Kelvin stood in the observation deck and watched his homeworld shrink away behind them. He thought about everything that had happened. He thought about the archive and the terrible history it contained. He thought about the offer Earth had made and the line it had drawn. Vector found him there an hour later. The Kryn commander stood beside the young human in silence for a while. Finally, he said, "Your people scare me now." "They scare me too," Kelvin admitted. "But I also respect them more than I did before. It takes great strength to walk away from a fight. It takes even greater strength to walk away when you know you could win." "We do not know if we could win," Kelvin said. "That is part of the problem. We are too confident in our ability to solve problems with violence. That confidence is dangerous." Vector nodded slowly. "When we return to the Council, they will ask me what I learned. What should I tell them?" Kelvin thought about that carefully. Then he said, "Tell them the truth. Tell them that humans do not stay away from war because they cannot fight. We stay away because we know exactly how well we can fight, and that knowledge terrifies us more than any enemy ever could.